Martin, known to many as Big Nick. His nickname wasn't just about his size. It reflected his massive presence and reputation. Imagine him as unstoppable, intense, and intimidating. The kind of figure that dominated every room he entered. But the larger-than-life image of Big Nick came crashing down in a moment that shocked the nation. Nick Martin was taken down by Dine Briovich, and it wasn't just a loss. It was a public humiliation. Once known as the Man Mountain, Nick was considered untouchable. Towering and powerful, he was like a human fortress. But everything changed on December 12, 2020, at the Perth Motorplex. The roar of drag races filled the night air. Lights cut through the darkness, and nearly 2,000 spectators watched in awe, unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. At 8:30 p.m., from 335 meters away, a sniper took aim. One breath, one trigger pull, one bullet. Nick Martin slumped forward in his seat. His final words were, "Babe, I've been shot." But was this the end of his story? Or just the final chapter in a complex, controversial life? Nick was born in 1969 in the United Kingdom to Sid and R. Martin. When he was just 6 months old, his family moved to Australia in search of a better life. He had a simple, wholesome childhood, riding bikes, climbing trees, and getting lost in the Australian bush. There were no smartphones, no internet, just freedom. Despite a peaceful upbringing, Nick eventually found his way into the outlaw world, not because he had to, but because he was drawn to it. He wasn't the kind of man who followed rules. At 17, he dropped out of school and left home. His first job? A nightclub bouncer, thrown into Perth's roughest crowd. By 18, he was already on the police radar. Nick's criminal record started stacking up. Dangerous driving in 1988, a $22,000 fine. Then a $2,000 fine for assault after a fight at Aqua nightclub in 1996. He wasn't skimming the edge of the law. He was fully immersed in it. Eventually, he joined the Rebels Motorcycle Club. He didn't just wear the patch, he embodied it. He rose quickly through the ranks and became the WA president. By 2005, he was running Western Australia with authority. Standing at 6 feet 5 inches, Nick was truly the Man Mountain. He even ditched the traditional biker look for designer streetwear, turning himself into a brand and reshaping what it meant to be an outlaw. By 2011, he was officially the WA chapter president and one of the most powerful figures in the club. His leadership transformed the Rebels from a biker group into an empire. When the Canadian rock machine MC tried to establish a presence in Perth in 2009, Nick led the charge in a violent turf war. There were fights, car bombs, and even an attempted assassination in 2011, which he survived. Nick wasn't afraid of rival gangs, and he didn't fear the police. When authorities raided a Rebels clubhouse in 2010 and found nothing, Nick publicly demanded compensation for the damage. His message was clear: the Rebels weren't just criminals, they were a force to be respected. While the national leadership focused on international expansion, Nick extended the Rebels into New Zealand by 2011, solidifying their status as a global outlaw club. For years, he was untouchable, feared, and admired, but by mid-2020, everything began to unravel. Rumors of financial misconduct surfaced. Allegations claimed Nick was using club funds for luxury renovations. In a world where loyalty is everything, that kind of betrayal is unforgivable. By the end of 2020, Nick was ousted as WA president. Criminal charges followed and fractures within the club deepened. Nick never sought alliances. He ran things independently. Even when working closely with the Rebels' national president, Alex Vell, relationships within the club eventually soured. One of the most devastating betrayals came from David Pye, a former rebel who joined the rival Sierros gang, leading to a personal feud that had deadly consequences. Despite his outlaw life, Nick was also a family man. He met Amanda, known as Shoppy, in 2005, the same year he rose in the rebels. His family described him as loyal, a trait that defined both his personal life and club leadership. But tragedy followed him, even there. In 2010, his close friend Mario Pin, whom he had personally recruited, was murdered in front of his family. By 2018, Nick's control over the club was slipping. Legal charges for extortion, tax evasion, and laundering piled up. Accusations of misusing club dues triggered internal rebellion. Nick resigned as president but remained influential, operating behind the scenes through his trusted lieutenant, Aaron Carl LeBrook. Still, rival gangs sensed weakness. On November 24, 2020, at the Sandbar in Scarborough, tensions came to a boiling point. A handshake between Nick and Dean Abriovic, feared sergeant-at-arms of the Hells Angels, turned into a violent brawl. Dean, a trained cage fighter, dominated the fight. Chairs flew, fists landed, and Nick was hospitalized. Though Dean A walked away with only an $800 fine, Nick suffered a public defeat that damaged his once impenetrable image. For those in the outlaw world, this was no ordinary fight. It was a message. Nick's era of dominance was ending. Rumors swirled. Would the rebels retaliate? Then came December 12, 2020. The Perth Motorplex was alive with engines and excitement. Families, fans, and kids filled the stands. Nick was relaxed, sitting among the crowd, unguarded, vulnerable. At 8:30 p.m., a single shot shattered the night. It came from a .308 caliber rifle, fired from 335 meters away. It hit Nick with deadly precision. "Babe, I've been shot," he said. His wife Amanda thought he was having a heart attack until she saw the blood. The bullet passed through Nick, striking Ricky Chapman, his stepdaughter's partner, and grazing his step-grandson. One shot, 3 lives forever changed. The scene erupted into chaos. Families ran, police scrambled. This wasn't random, it was a professional hit. A former Special Forces soldier, 34 years old, no criminal ties, was behind it. A marksman with military precision. Nick Martin's assassination wasn't just a killing, it was a power shift. A symbol that even the most feared outlaw could fall. His reign ended not in a hidden alley, but in front of 2,000 witnesses, a reminder that in the underworld, no one stays untouchable forever. He had meticulously surveilled the Motorplex for weeks, pinpointed Martin's habitual seat, infiltrated the venue through a hole he'd previously cut in the fence, removed a safety ramp to ensure an unobstructed line of sight, honed his shooting skills, and then, with the composure of a seasoned operative, he took the shot. It was precise, efficient, and final. But the most incriminating revelation came later. The assassination was not a spontaneous act, but a calculated operation. At its core was David Pye, a former rebel who had once been close to Martin but had since risen to a senior position in the rival Comancheros gang. Their bond had soured, and Pye orchestrated what many thought impossible. He reached out from the shadows and brought down the giant. The sniper was not a lone actor but a hired assassin, executing a meticulously planned hit. Court records laid bare the details: preparation, logistics, precision. It was surgical, ruthless, and professional. The message was unmistakable. In this world, no one is untouchable. Under the immense pressure of a murder conviction, the hitman eventually confessed. He detailed every chilling aspect of the assassination that had sent shockwaves through Australia's outlaw world. It wasn't merely about pulling the trigger. He had been compensated for the weeks of planning, the military-grade precision, and, above all, his silence. But silence is fleeting. After receiving a portion of his final payment, cracks began to appear. Court documents unveiled a darker scheme. Pi had already identified another high-value target and intended to employ the same sniper again. Another payday, another life, another shift in power. But before this second act could unfold, both the sniper and Pi were apprehended. When the case proceeded to trial, the evidence was overwhelming. The marksman, once a phantom, was now fully exposed. A former Special Forces soldier turned contract killer. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, eligible for parole after 18, due to his cooperation and willingness to testify against Pi, which spared him the harshest sentence. Pi, on the other hand, faced trial for orchestrating the execution of a man he had once considered a brother. Martin's pending legal issues, including extortion and tax evasion, were overshadowed by his death. Allegations involving his wife, Amanda, were dismissed, as a deceased person cannot stand trial. However, the chaos left in the wake of his death became the new focal point. The assassin's method was a masterclass in cold, calculated violence. After the shot, he didn't flee in panic. He moved with the same methodical precision that had defined the entire operation. He discarded his gear, replaced the rifle barrel to avoid forensic detection, and vanished. Yet, even his military discipline couldn't outmaneuver science indefinitely. Ballistics matched the bullet. Footprints linked to a rare brand of shoes. Phone data confirmed the timeline. Then came the money. Investigators uncovered $150,000 hidden in PVC pipes. Blood money, the sniper's cut. It led them directly back to Pi, nicknamed the Baker, now accused of ordering Martin's execution and plotting others, including a rival Comanchero leader. Pi's elaborate power grab had backfired. In December 2021, the sniper pleaded guilty to 4 charges, including murder. A dramatic courtroom moment, but the story wasn't over. His cooperation came with conditions. If he ever refused to testify against Pi, his sentence could be revisited. Pi's trial, delayed until 2025, remains a powder keg waiting to ignite. Nick Martin's death wasn't merely a biker feud. It was a seismic shift in Australia's outlaw motorcycle landscape. Almost overnight, law enforcement pressure intensified. Surveillance escalated. Politicians and citizens alike were forced to confront how deeply outlaw motorcycle clubs had embedded themselves into society. Within the rebels, the loss was catastrophic. Martin hadn't just been a figurehead. He was the stabilizing force in Western Australia. With him gone, the local chapter splintered. The national leadership scrambled to fill the void, appointing a new WA president. But it was too late. Internal conflict erupted. Members defected. Rivals like the Comancheros and Hell's Angels sensed an opportunity. Then came the ultimate betrayal. Martin's successor in WA defected, switching sides to the Comancheros, the very club linked to Martin's death. That move shattered what was left of rebel dominance in the region. The streets reacted. Martin's assassination opened the floodgates for chaos. The rebels were reeling, and the streets buzzed with a dangerous energy. Comancheros and Hell's Angels surged forward, eager to carve up the territory Martin had once ruled. But it wasn't just outlaw clubs fighting in the shadows. Law enforcement came down hard. Operation REL was launched, one of the largest policing efforts in Western Australia's history. Over 100 officers from homicide, gang crime, and intelligence units united under one mission: shut it down. The Joker's Law,